Hi there. Thanks all for coming today. It's nice to see so many faces here. I wasn't sure what to expect with who was going to be here and how many, but yeah, it's nice to see a good crowd. So thank you for coming. So I'm not going to speak for long. I'm just here to do a bit of an introduction and chair Rama and Wanarusi's session. So my name's Robin. I work for a small charity based here in Scotland, but we work with community groups in Kenya and in a few other countries, but mostly in Kenya, to support community-based management of mangrove forests. So Rama and Wanarusi are going to give you a bit more information about what mangrove forests are. I know that some people are very familiar with them, some people aren't at all. Just to get an idea, can I have a show of hands of who knows what a mangrove forest is? About half of you, so okay. So basically, as a short introduction, mangrove forests are these incredible forests that grow on our coasts. So as most of you know, if you're into gardening, salt is every gardener's worst enemy, and no plants like salt. But mangroves are kind of the exception to this rule, and they love salty environments, and they grow on our coasts in the intertidal region, actually into the sea itself. And this is the reason they're such kind of superheroes of the forest world when it comes to climate change, because they store massive amounts of carbon in their soils, because the soils underneath them are wet, they're waterlogged, bacteria can't grow and break down that carbon and be released as it is in kind of terrestrial soils. So they have these huge, huge stores, up to kind of 8 times as much carbon as terrestrial forests. And it's not surprising that not more than half of you know what mangrove forests are, because it's only fairly recently that even scientists have really begun to recognize just how powerful mangrove forests are and recognize them and protect them. So this is where Ram and Wanarusi come in. They are the project coordinators of 2 community-led mangrove forest conservation and reforestation projects right down in the very southern coast of Kenya. So the projects are called Mikoko Pamoja, which means mangroves together in Swahili, and Vanga Blue Forest. So they are the leaders of these kind of pioneering community-led projects. And they protect these mangrove forests that not only store carbon, but protect the coasts from erosion and storms, and also support huge amounts of biodiversity, which is important for things like tourism and fisheries, which support people's livelihoods. And the people who rely on these mangrove forests are really kind of at the heart of the projects that Ram and Wanarusi they lead, because these people live kind of in such close entwinement with these forests that you really can't separate environmental conservation and people. So they lead these community-led projects, helping the community to conserve these mangrove forests. So I'll pass on now to Rama, who's going to speak to you first. Rama is the coordinator of the Mikoko Pamoja project.
Let me get this. I guess I'll just leave it there. Hi, everyone. So my name is Rahma Rashid. I work with the Mikoko Pamoja Carbon Offset Project as a project coordinator, or some of you can also term me as the project manager. Thank you, Robin, for that introduction. I'm really glad to be here with you today to share our experience with working with the local communities of Kenya, specifically those that are located along the southern coast of Kenya. Without further ado, I guess we can move on to the next slide. So before I go on to that, I'd also like to point out my colleague here, who's Wanarusi, leading the Vanga Blue Forest project. She'll be taking us on the second part of this presentation today. So basically, like Robin introduced, Mikoko Pamoja is a Swahili term that means mangroves together. It is what brings communities together, and not just communities, but all the related stakeholders or various practitioners who are involved in the aspect of sustainability and mangrove conservation as well as climate change. So the two projects with Mikoko Pamoja being the first of the two, having started in the year 2013, work towards the conservation and restoration of about 117 hectares, and that is for Mikoko Pamoja, to 460 hectares. That's for the case of Vanga Blue Forest project, by engaging the local communities in these actions where they get to benefit from the sale of mangrove carbon credits. We have been verified by the Plan Vivo Foundation through the Plan Vivo standards to operate for a period of 20 years. This is currently our 8th year of operation for Mikoko Pamoja. It is the 2nd year of operation for Vanga Blue Forest. And we have been able to contribute massively to both the socioeconomic as well as the environmental prosperity of the local communities. So we find that most of the funds that have been generated from the sequestration abilities of the mangrove forest, and that is about 2,500 tons of carbon every year for Mikoko Pamoja, and 5,000 tons of CO2 equivalent that are being sequestered every year. And from it, we get about 3 million to 5 million Kenyan shillings. That is about $25,000 to $50,000. And much of this goes back to contribute or to fund more conservation efforts, as well as develop the local communities that we're working with. Mikoko Pamoja is working with 2 communities, which basically constitute of about 9,000 individuals. Vanga Blue Forest works with 3 communities, which is the Vanga, Kiwegu, and Jimbo communities, which I guess she'll be able to tell you how many individuals are found in those communities. So next slide. So why choose to work with mangroves and not any other ecosystem? So as Robin mentioned, we see the ability or the capacity of the mangrove ecosystem to absorb CO2 from the atmosphere, which is actually 8 to 10 times more as compared to the other terrestrial forests. And we find that this is the ecosystem that is located or is adjacent to the local communities who are living there. And we find that the community members also rely on this ecosystem for their livelihoods. It can be through the various cultural benefits that they get from it, or the ecological benefits that they also get from it. Now we have on the side of cultural benefits, just speaking about the communities using such ecosystems as religious grounds. We have what we call the kayas, which are basically, how do you define this? But it's where the communities go to make their prayers to what they believe to be their supreme being. So we have most of the cultural aspect happening there. And then on the side of ecological benefits, we know mangroves to, yes, absorb the CO2 from the atmosphere. They also serve to act as barriers against coastal erosion, and also assist the communities or prevent issues of adverse, should I say, oceanic phases that can occur, such as rise in sea levels and such. But again, notice that I'm not speaking much about the provisioning benefits that can be obtained from this ecosystem, which is inclusive of the firewood, as well as the construction poles for their various buildings in the villages. Why is this? I'm not doing this because as Mikoko Pamoja or VBF, we are advocating for the conservation of this ecosystem. So what we're trying to do is to avoid making or turning the carbon sinks to rather acting as carbon sources. Because even when someone gets to harvest a a log that has fallen on the ground and they use it for firewood purposes, yeah? You get that much of the carbon that would have been stored in such an element will get released back into the atmosphere, which is not what we are trying to do. It will be against our values as Mikoko Pamoja in the aspect of reducing emissions to the atmosphere. Next slide. So for Mikoko Pamoja and VBF, we wouldn't be here if it were not for the 4 aspects that have been listed there. We advocate our success to the presence of the government or the support from the government. We know that all of Kenyan mangrove forests are a state-owned property. They are owned by the government. And so the government put across the co-management aspect between themselves and the local communities who are living there to, I guess, put up that inclusive nature of practice towards sustainability, or rather environmental protection or marine resource conservation. So we have the Kenya Forest Service, which is basically the organization or the authority that has been mandated by the Kenyan government to conserve or manage all our forests. And through the, Forest Act 2016, there's the clause that allows for, like I said, co-management between the government and the local communities. So this makes it a more wholesome approach towards conservation as well as sustainability. And then again, on the second point, we have the presence of the researchers. Now we find that the mangrove forests of Gazi are the most studied forests in, I guess, in the whole of Africa, or one of the most studied forests in the whole of Africa. So there's been a lot of research and studies taking place in the area with facilitation from volunteers, as well as we have our very own Kenyan organization or research institute known as the Kenya Marine Fisheries Research Institute. We have one of the substations that is located in Gasi, which is where we are located as Mikoko Pamoja. So from the long-term relationship between the researchers and the communities, definitely you need trust to establish such a project, because you're coming to a local community who is more or less not that very knowledgeable about what you're trying to offer them. Speaking about issues of carbon financing, that was a very new concept at that time, and trying to find that synergy between, the local knowledge as well as the indigenous knowledge was very key. And I guess this was more or less facilitated by the presence of the researchers who are working on that area at that time. So yes, we had Kemfrey. We also had institutions such as the Edinburgh Napier University, and then more volunteers coming in from organizations such as the Association for Coastal Ecosystem Services. So yeah, that's about the research. And again, on another building block or foundation is the presence of the buyers. Again, this is a thread that we're dealing with. So without the buyers, we won't be able to get that incentive from carbon financing. So ideally speaking, we've been having a constant, entry or and constant relationship. Actually, a good relationship with our buyers. Currently, we don't have any issue. We can say we don't have any issue with sourcing out for buyers, because all our credits are usually sold before the year ends. And again, last but not least, we have the presence of the community. Now, I've placed the community in the middle of all the three, because the community at the main aspect to the project. We call it a community-led project. And we say this because, one, they are the main implementers of the project, as well as two, them being the main beneficiaries to the project. So we try to involve them, or in the formulation or the establishment of such a project, you definitely have to have that constant engagement with the local communities in terms of the implementation, in terms of project governance, in terms of getting to decide on how the benefits will be distributed among every individual in the community. Next slide. again, when you're speaking about the presence of the local communities, this is, I guess, an image showing how we get to involve our local communities in various decision-making processes that are related to do with the project. And in this particular picture, we show members from our communities having a discussion on how to go about the element of the benefit sharing structure. That is basically the allocation of the generated revenue towards community development projects that they would actually propose on to be implemented for that particular year. So we have this activity taking place every single year. And we usually have 2 barazas. I mean, barazas is like the Swahili term to refer to a community gathering. So that's actually very effective in our villages. So we get to like have or engage the youth, the elderly, it can be women. I mean, getting to hear voices from all these marginalized groups among our communities. Next slide. So this is an example or an illustration of how our resources get to be allocated across the villages. Now, out of the 100% that we generate in terms of revenue from the sale of mangrove carbon credits, we get to have 6% that goes towards our validation process, which takes place which takes place after every 5 years. Now, this happens with the help of an external validator coming in, and such a process is also facilitated with the help of our partnering organizations, and that is ACES. And then the other 94% goes towards community benefit. It can be, like I say, towards conservation or in the implementation of the various community development projects. And most of these have been able to address different aspects of 1, water and sanitation, 2, education, job creation for the local opportunity, for the local members of the community. It can be permanent jobs or more casual jobs on a day-to-day basis, depending on the various activities that we have in our work plan. So we have 21% going towards the payment of the project coordinator, and then we have 5% catering for office expenses. The other 36% goes to finance or to facilitate various project activities such as forest monitoring, where we get to engage the local community members in the measurement of our carbon stocks. So you basically go to the forest, get the width and the height of the tree, submit your collected data through various an analysis process, and then convert that into biomass. No, convert that into carbon using an allometric equation that we have. And then the other 32% now goes towards funding these projects. Should I? Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. I believe I'd like to welcome Mwana Rusi now to take you through the other part or the last part of this presentation. Thank you for having me.
Hello, everyone. Is it good morning or good afternoon? Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mwana Rusi Mwafrika, as my colleagues have introduced me, and I think we can take the floor and continue. Hope where we've reached now, for those who didn't know what mangroves are, at least they have an idea of what mangroves are, right? So basically our projects are to restore and conserve the mangrove forests. In return, we do get, the trees do sequester carbon, and from the sequestration of the carbon, that's how we do the business in terms of the carbon cells that are made. So my colleague has just left on the benefit sharing. Benefit sharing is the sharing of the funds that are collected after the cells are Med. Okay. Are we together up to there? Yes. I think I can continue now. So what are the project milestones? I'm used to walking around, so don't get distracted with that. So what are the project milestones of these two projects? Vanga Blue Forest and Mikoko Pamoja. So from 1st June on 2009, we talk of consultation meetings with the community, first of all, because for any projects that you want to bring it into the community, you have first of all to get a prior consent from the community. Because if the community does not have the acceptance of whatever you're bringing in, then it means that project won't last, okay? So in 2009, that is what happened, the prior consent. And in January 2010, a PIN and a PDD was established or was drafted by the help of Plan Vivo Foundation. And in March 2010, the establishment of Mikoko Pamoja Committee and initial discussions over the PFMP. That's the management plan, sorry. When we talk about a management committee, it doesn't mean that if you have a particular project, the entire community will come and work with it because it's a community project. No, you have to put people who are going to govern that particular project. So that's called a committee. Not everybody in the community takes to lead or takes to have certain roles within the project. So the committee that would lead that particular project was set on that particular year, and a management plan that shows the guideline on how the project was to be conducted was also set on that particular, which is 2010. And on September, a formal agreement of plan at village meeting was also agreed. And in November 2010, Mikoko Pamoja Committee meets formally to review the project process. That is from the initial state, from the conversations when they were starting in terms of the prior consent, up to when the management plan was drafted. That was all reviewed, okay? So 2011, we are talking about establishment of a community organization, okay? So the community organization is a CFA. The Forest Association, sorry. This is an association that governs the forest within the local area with the assistance of the government that my colleague has already said. And in terms of government, you're talking about the Kenya Forest Association. So then in July 2012, we talk about the launch of Mikoko Pamoja within the village. It moves on to 2013. The Goga Kofa, that is the CFA, it's managed, forest management plan by KFS, and that third-party visitation were also done. And that's the year when the first sale was done for that particular project, okay? I don't want to bore you with all this history. Maybe we can go to the next slide, please. So what do we get from these sorts of projects? What do we achieve from the conservation of the mangrove forest? The first picture that you can see here on my left, it will be on your right. This is a picture of a mangrove tree bark. There are certain small organisms that you can just see. They're very sharp organisms which depend on the mangroves for survival. So you can see the mangrove tree, it's not only a single tree, but there are other organisms that depend on that particular ecosystem. So by conserving the mangrove forest, you are also conserving an entire biodiversity within that particular area. The other achievement for Mikoko Pamoja, it was recognized during the Nobel Equator Prize, that is in 2017. The project was recognized for its efforts in terms of the conservation of the environment. Then below here, this is a project which has recently been completed by the community from the cells that have been obtained from the carbon credits, okay? So this is a water project, and the water is used to supply a local mosque. A mosque is a religious place where the Muslims go to. So the community did sit down. There's that picture that my colleague has just showed you. So that's a meeting whereby after the cells, the community sits down to prioritize on whatever they want. So in that particular meeting, they said, oh, our local mosque has no water, so we should prioritize on water. So the tank was bought, water was also piped into the mosque, and this is what they benefit from. So it's a mosque that supports around 9,000 livelihoods, because she has said in that particular village, 9,000 people reside in that village. So you can see these projects goes back to benefit the community. On this other picture, it's a picture that was taken during the COVID pandemic. So from donations from our colleagues, that is ESSIS. ESSIS is here in Scotland. Maybe most of you know it. For those who don't know it, maybe you can also get into contact with Robin, the lady who spoke here at first. So ESSIS is our supporting organization, which links us to the buyers, which links the two projects to the buyers of the carbon, okay? So through accessory, we were able to obtain donations that were able to cushion the families who were affected during the pandemic, okay? So we were able, as a project, we were able to support the community in terms of food, in terms of sanitary products also. So it's a project that is for the community and benefits the community. The other picture on my far end, it's a picture of school girls. So it's through the project, we also established another smaller project whereby we support the school girls, because at certain times of the year, they usually do not go to school because of the period shame. They don't attend classes. So we did support a number of 108 school girls, at least for one year period, for them to keep on going to school without any absenteeism, sorry. The other thing, what's the success story of Mikoko Pamoja? We've said it started some years back, but it is through Mikoko Pamoja that it led to the birth of Vanga Blue Forest. That is the project that I work on. Mikoko Pamoja has a total scale of 117 hectares, while Vanga Blue Forest has a total of 460 hectares. When you talk about an hectare, I think it's like 500 football grounds, right, Robin? The 460. It's like 500 football grounds. Basically, let's just vision that, okay? So it is through the success story of Mikoko Pamoja that it did upscale to something else, and a replica was also implemented in another area just next to where the sister project is, or where the founder project is, and that is Vanga Blue Forest. So that's another achievement for Mikoko Pamoja, or for the project. The other thing, it is through the project that we tend also to observe, let's say, the needs of the community, what the conservationists talk about daily. And also, we are now talking about the climate crisis, I believe, right? So it is through managing the forests that we tend to also contribute to the policies that are formed, which are the NDCs and the NMPPs, sorry. And through these two projects, when you look at all what I have said, in terms of the health, in terms of the water and sanitation, in terms of biodiversity, these all aspects are encompassed in the SDGs, the different SDGs that are there. When we talk about SDG 14, when we talk about the SDG on water, life underwater, the SDG on climate action, which is SDG 14, all those are captured in the SDGs. I hope we all know them, right? Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So what are the challenges in leading these projects? As we believe, there is nothing that doesn't face any challenge in this world, right? So one of the challenges that we do face is boundary delineation. These are coastal forests, remember, and the coastal forests are just by the coastal communities who do like manage this particular forest. So these community members are used to going on their daily lives by acquiring resources from the forest in terms of either firewood. When I talk of firewood, maybe there's somebody who doesn't know firewood. Firewood is energy that is used in cooking, maybe using the open fire stoves, okay? So the forest is actually like a basic need for the community, for the coastal communities. By delineating the area, this brings about elimination of the conflicts between the community, in that if you are a community and we are conserving the forest, it means that the forest will be conserved provided their needs are met, okay? So boundary delineation is a key point that has to be dealt with. This has to be achieved when there is a link between the government and the community. So in our case, for the Kenyan forest, there are mentioned of the CFS, these are the co-management elements whereby it allows the community to interact with the forest, but it's still quite not efficient. So it's a challenge to us because you can't limit somebody on the amount of what he or she wants to let's say, obtain from the forest, okay? So on to the second challenge, that is lack of income diversification. As of now, we solely depend on the carbon sales that we make from the carbon credits that we sell, that is through Access and through Plan Vivo Foundation. Without the sales, we are doomed. Our salaries are also doomed. We don't have salaries. So this is a challenge because what if through the forest, we tend to like have other projects, let's say like beekeeping, maybe like just something else, but through the same resource, by them conserving the same resource that they have, the mangrove forest, that is. So lack of income diversification, it's quite a very big challenge for the two projects. The third challenge is not meeting planting targets, which makes the project miss out on payment. Planting is one of the objectives or one of the elements that the project has to achieve by the end of the year. But you find out that when you plant, as much as our target is to plant, let's say like 4,000 trees per year. But by the end of the year, when you go to the field and count the trees, you won't get the 4,000 that you planted. You might get maybe 200, at most 500. So you see, that's a big challenge, because if they had all grown to maybe the 4,000 attained that exact number, it means that in the long term, it would have also accumulated in terms of the carbon that was to be sequestered, meaning that the project will obtain more cells, and also it won't lack in terms of income and also running of the project and also development of the community itself. So the next slide, please. Okay, what are our future aspirations as projects, as conservation projects? So our first aspiration is to be a center of excellence. Since it's a community-led organization, we aspire that in the long term, the community will be empowered in terms of their own environment, their behavior, how they are supposed to sustainably manage it, and how they're also supposed to like interact with it in terms of passing out information also to their younger ones. And in addition to that also, and how they can also like mix up or link up the traditional knowledge and also the knowledge that we learn as the science. Our next aspiration is to support low carbon cooking stoves. I've talked about the firewood, the energy that is obtained from the mangroves. That's quite a challenge because each and every day, each and every meal has to be cooked using the firewood. That means the mangroves are cut in the long run, right? So why don't we just leave them with their lifestyle, that they continue cooking as usual, but then we bring it in a sustainable way. So this is our mission on how we can make it sustainable. This is by introducing these low energy stoves because they just consume little amount of wood. And also in terms of health, they are quite good because they do not release so much smoke. Then on the other third aspect is inclusion of seagrass ecosystems. The Kenyan coastline is well known for its mangroves and also other ecosystems which include the seagrass. The seagrass beds are also ecosystems that do have a much larger capability of sequestering carbon just like the mangroves, okay? So our future aspiration is to include the seagrass into our work. And currently we have already started the discussions, and I believe in due time in Vanga Blue Forest, we will have also included the seagrass project into our work or into our mangrove systems. The next thing, which is our future aspirations. As a government back in Kenya, there is not much inclusion of these critical ecosystems that are actually threatened with the climate crisis. So it is through the research that is done, it is through the conservation work that is done, that we do aspire that this entire effort will be put and also be channeled to contributing towards highlighting the NDCs and the MPPs. Next slide, please. Okay, I believe I've come to the end of my presentation or our presentation. So for further information, contact us at that, either Mikoko Pamoja or Vanga Blue Forest, or you can also visit the Plan Vivo organization. That's the validation organization. And also to offset with us, we offset with Access. That's their website, and the contact person is also here. So thank you so much. But before I leave this stage, I would like to leave with a pass home message. We talk about mangrove ecosystems back from where we come. Mangroves grow in tropical or subtropical regions. I believe here you talk about the bog, right? If I'm not wrong. So it doesn't matter what ecosystem you have, or it doesn't matter maybe why you don't have a particular ecosystem. What matters is what you do with whatever you have, because we are talking about climate crisis. And with climate crisis, we are talking about all these storms. Currently in India, we are talking about very not suitable rains, very weird storms that tend to displace so many people from their lives, from their livelihoods, or it disrupts the entire life system of several people, okay? So when climate crisis hits, it doesn't hit a particular person or a particular nation. It hits all, it hits all people. So what we have to do as a take-home message, make use of whatever resource you have. If we have the bogs, let's try and find out what are the importance of maybe the bogs. What can we do with them so as to tackle climate change? Because it's like everybody, climate change now is trending. I've come from where I come from just because of the climate change talk, the COP26. So I believe by doing whatever you can in your own capability, that's it, because you will be contributing to this talk of ending climate change or slowing down the impacts of climate change. That's the end of my talk. In case of any questions, we are here, the three of us, and we'll gladly welcome as many questions as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. I hope everybody enjoyed that. So if anybody has any questions, we'd happily take them. In the black t-shirt.
My question is, who buys the carbon credit?
I'll respond to that if Robin will allow me. So the people who buy credits, it's anyone can buy the carbon credits. But as for now, we solely depend on people who, like, let's say, like you yourself, you might come and say, I want to maybe buy this amount of carbon credits. There are also those people who tend to travel mostly using the airplanes. So they'll be like, oh, I want to offset the amount that I've emitted, okay? So through Access, you'll also be assisted in maybe calculating whatever you've emitted. At times, you're also approached by organizations, maybe like the tourist companies. It all depends. So it's not a particular person. Anybody can do that. And maybe if you have further questions in terms of the carbon emissions and stuff, she's the perfect one. And she's from Scotland. So I maybe have walked out of this hall. You don't have, maybe you won't get the chance to ask me another day, but you can always contact her through this website. Thank you.
Thanks. At the back there.
Right, thank you. That was really interesting. I was interested in, so I think it was in 2008 that the project started. If the initiation was a community-led initiation, was it approached Kenya Forestry Service, or it was a selection process for where the projects began?
Sorry, can you come again?
It's more about the initial communities that began the projects. How was it the communities themselves that started the kind of work, or was it Kenya Forestry Service that approached them, or just how it kind of began?
Yeah, so who had the first idea? Was it the community? Was it the scientists?
Okay, again, the scientists did have the first idea, but like I mentioned, you have to work with the community because they are living adjacent to this resource that you want to work on in terms of the issue of carbon finance. And I guess also at that time, the Paris Agreement had also happened. So there was the whole aspect of the carbon trade and developing countries or developed countries contributing to the developing countries in terms of offering them with finance incentives or financial incentives for that. Yeah.
And also maybe I would like to add on to that. This project, the Mikoko Pamoja project, did start as to how she has elaborated. But as for Vanga Blue Forest, it's the community that saw what the other community was benefiting in terms of the communal and social development aspect. So it is through the community that they did voice out their concerns. So they did approach the scientists who started the work in Mikoko Pamoja. So they did sit with them down and also inquired on how they would also replicate the same thing into their area. Thank you.
Can I just pick up on the last point that you were talking about there, Rama? You mentioned that kind of disparity between developed and developing nations, and it's the money comes from the developed nations to implement projects in developing nations. So Rama and Wanarisi have come from Kenya, where the average individual's carbon footprint is 0.3 tons every year. Here in the UK, our average carbon footprint is 10 tons every year. So even just the average person has about 10 times the carbon impact that somebody in Kenya has. And that's one criticism of carbon offsetting sometimes, is that it's kind of our guilt, and we're kind of, we are perpetuating this unsustainable lifestyle that we live in the West by paying projects and groups in developing countries to implement these projects. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, the controversy is there definitely, but again, we have to look at the benefits that are coming from this, because we're speaking of countries whose financial level is very low, and when you're speaking about supporting the most marginalized of the communities that are found in that particular country, I mean, such an incentive, even if there's the whole controversy, but again, it also goes back to the fact that it's the tiniest of efforts towards whether you're trying to address the socioeconomic aspect or the environmental aspect that matters. So the countries, definitely the developed countries are bringing in the financial incentives to the people, but what I see that matters most is how we get to use this in terms of reversing the impact of climate change. And again, we see that the least developed countries are the ones who are facing the most impact in relation to climate change. We're the ones facing most of the rising, the coastal reclamation by the ocean, with the one facing most of the changes in temperatures. Because, for example, here in Scotland, it's now very cold to me. Where I'm coming from, it's like so hot. We've been noticing some changes in weather patterns in terms of how much rain we receive. In fact, this year, we are at the risk of experiencing a drought in Kenya because the rains are so low. But again, if the developed countries are able to oblige to the Paris, the statements that were made in the Paris Agreement in terms of, contributing financially to countries like mine, then it's a good way, it's a good step forward. Yeah, it's both a 50-50 issue in terms of the benefits and the challenges, but it's giving an opportunity to these countries to offset their emissions through can we say reduce or contribute positively to the damage that is already being done at the moment.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Ruth.
Thank you so much for being the same for your talk. We've got lots of young people here today that are obviously interested in climate and their role in making progress. I wondered about young people in Kenya and whether they're engaged with these projects and interested in growing them for the future.
So how are young people involved in the projects and the future of the projects?
In the case of Meko Pamoja, is it the entire country? I will start with the more local level, yeah, with Meko Pamoja or VBF. Again, we do have a lot of conservation groups in our respective villages who are also supplementing our activities as the carbon finance model for Meko Pamoja and VBF. But again, we also find them doing a lot of volunteering as well as community service to address the various effects of whether it's climate change or environmental pollution. It can be in activities that are involved in addressing issues on waste pollution. And when I say we have a lot of our youth who are engaged in the various, conservation groups, this applies across the entire Kenya. So we do have a lot of CSOs and CBOs happening, and this is actually more of the civil society as well as the NGO and the nonprofit. And again, I believe the government has also been doing a lot in terms of supporting such groups. We have the co-management aspect. We also have them, various financial incentives that are put forward to, to facilitate such organizations.
Maybe just to add on to that, she's talked about the youth from our country. What about the youth from the international aspect or the global aspect? So we have several youths or several volunteers who usually visit our sites, maybe during their holidays, sometimes, or during their touristic visits. They also come and visit our project, when we are doing the monitoring activities, we also engage them in whatever we do. So we also, first of all, engage them by telling them what activity we are doing, why are we doing it, and maybe the benefits to it. So it's not on the local aspect only. We have so many volunteers who have come to Mikoko Pamoja as the starter, and also to a few have come to Vanga Blue Forest, because Vanga Blue Forest just started last year, which is 2020. And we all know that 2020 was quite static because of the COVID part. But a number of volunteers have approached our sister project. So it's not only on the local side, also the other people or you yourselves, maybe one time you can also take time and arrange a trip to Kenya to come and visit the project sites and work with us.
Ah, yes.
Obviously, these are big projects, large scale, and they said absolutely fantastic. From if you think back to the start, and obviously the government's it was hard to persuade the governments to take this on board. And would you have any tips for proposing projects like this?
It's a good question. So how did you engage governments in the project and get them on board? And do you have any advice for any other projects wanting to do the same?
I guess for Kenya, it wasn't that hard to get them engaged because, like I mentioned, we have the CFS, that is the the Community Forest Associations, who are basically our umbrella. We come in as a user group. They have a more direct link with the managing authority to all the Kenyan forests, that is the KFS. And I also mentioned the Forests Act that put in place the aspect of co-management. So when we started, when the idea came up, it wasn't so hard, like having that conversation with them. It was just a matter of formulating an agreement between the two of us on what area would want to work with and how long would basically be doing that, and basically what activities we would be wanting to engage in at that moment. And if I'm to advise the other governments, I'd say, I don't know how your policy works here between the citizens and the government, but I guess it's all clear now with, all the challenges we are facing with the issue of climate change. I don't think it will be that much of an issue in terms of talking to the government on a possible project to initiate, like to tackle a certain issue. Maybe the economic level may not be as targeted as my country, but speaking on the more wholesome aspect of environmental management and sustainability, as well as climate change, such a discussion would not be so difficult. But I guess you just have to have a structure or basically an implementation plan for your project.
Thanks, Rama. I would add to that as well. We're quite lucky in Kenya where we work that the legislation is there and quite strong to allow kind of the community forest associations to exist and to devolve management through those CFAs. So we have quite a good structure in Kenya that kind of allows that. That's not always the case, and particularly with regard to mangrove forests, because they kind of fall quite awkwardly between terrestrial ecosystems and marine ecosystems. And there are still countries where mangrove forests aren't actually included in either in terms of kind of policy and legislation. So some countries recognize them as forests, others don't. Some call them a marine ecosystem, some call them a terrestrial ecosystem. And sometimes, especially in the intertidal region between the high water mark and the low water mark, it's just a very gray area in terms of management. And so the CFA through which the management has been devolved has been really key to giving the community that kind of legal basis to govern the mangrove forests. But that can be a problem when you look at especially seagrass ecosystems that grow kind of more subtidal. The legislation and policy just isn't always there to actually devolve that management. So I think going forwards, it's really important that governments recognize that and recognize the importance of these coastal ecosystems and build them much more strongly kind of into their legislation. Hi there.
Please be louder, Alicia.
So looking at scaling up, how can we take the lessons that we've learned from your projects and apply them elsewhere in the world and at a bigger scale?
So basically you are saying that you are asking how can the other, let's say like the other nations who do not have the mangroves maybe contribute to this? Oh, okay. The main thing here, I believe it draws back to the building blocks. The diagram that we just saw in terms of the science, in terms of the community, and in terms of the government. So most of the times it becomes quite hard with the government. Maybe the legislations are quite not not maybe coming up, not coming close to how maybe what we want it to be. So what I would advise, it's when we are talking about the government, it's not like the bigger government, like the president and prime minister, but we target, let's say like the particular section or department that governs the forest. So let's say for our case, the person who, let's say like governs the forests, it's the Kenya Forest Service, the KFS. So by sitting down with the KFS, because our ideas seem like they somehow rhyme, so when they hear our pleas on what we want to do, they also like resonate it or take the message up to the government, I mean to the upper government. So it draws back to the building blocks. We have to ensure that if you want the project to be successful, all those three, the four aspects that we just mentioned, the community, the science, and what else, the government, they all have to interlink and be strong. Or maybe she can contribute more.
I guess, I mean, having Vanga Blue Forest here with us is an example of that. And we've had more replications in various parts of the world. I guess there's a project in Madagascar known as the Tahiri Hongo project, which is actually, I mean, the guys were interested from the achievements of Mikoko Pamoja and the information that we were putting, across in relation to what we've been doing and how far we were at that particular point. So they came in for a benchmarking session with the project back in 2016. And it is through that and through, much engagement with the project as well as the partners to the project, that they got to learn about how to establish such similar projects. So I guess it's more of a collaborative approach, a multidisciplinary approach. Being open with what you know about and sharing it with other communities, being open to receiving them, or if you do have the resources, then you can share it on, as Mikoko Pamoja, we do have a lot of videos telling about the project. And I guess from the various social media channels that we currently have, that has been a good platform for us to put across what we know and what we've been doing and engage with people who could be interested in starting a similar project in their area. But again, it's also much on the legislative bit. If the governments are able to support their people in terms of starting up that project, or whether it's an NGO or a nonprofit organization, then I guess if they have the proper structures for it, they can get to interact with the already established projects and do the same for their own places.
Thanks both. I would add there as well, I think one kind of driving force behind the success of the projects in Kenya is, and I think something that's probably in common with governments all around the world, is that they love to have the bragging rights, to have the first of this type of thing or the best of that. And Kenya really is a kind of world leader in what's called blue carbon, these kind of blue carbon ecosystems, mangrove forests, seagrass meadows, in blue carbon conservation, largely thanks to the two projects that Ram and Wanarusi lead, because it was they were, or at least Mikoko Pamoja was the first type of its work, of its first project of its type in the world. So Mikoko Pamoja has been mentioned by the Kenyan president in public speeches. It's very much recognized at a high level, and something that Kenya is proud of. So I think having that kind of recognition and being able to say, we're a world leader in this area has definitely been a driving force behind government support for the projects. Any more questions? I just have one last one, just picking up on something that Moana Ruth mentioned at the end. Here in Scotland, our version of blue carbon is kind of salt marshes and bogs, so peat bogs. So peat bogs are, again, really incredible ecosystems. They also store massive amounts of carbon and support biodiversity, but they're also, probably to the average Scot, the most boring ecosystem to look at. They're pretty flat, they're pretty featureless. Do you have any recommendations or advice for how we can get people excited about these ecosystems? Obviously with mangrove forests, you can see from the picture, they're very kind of charismatic ecosystems and they look really nice, but I guess in your case, the value lies for the people who depend on them in the firewood they can provide and kind of things other than their conservation value. So from your experience of kind of convincing the people who are so reliant on mangroves to conserve them, how would you, what advice would you offer Scots in kind of convincing people to conserve peat bogs instead of kind of overlooking them?
Okay, first thing I will comment on going back to the science part, because I believe the bogs have not been like constantly like that, or they are pristine since maybe we were born or since our great grandparents. I believe there is a time maybe they were changed to something else or maybe altered to something else. So we go back to maybe the science part, or it's not a matter of science. You can just go back to maybe the site and observe, also inquire on how the initial state the area was and how now it is, and also maybe the adverse changes that have taken place due to that particular change that has been done on that particular area. So let's say a good example is the mangroves, or a case of Vanga, where I come from. Vanga is a small village. There was a certain time whereby the community members used to cut down the mangroves as a means of trade to the Arabian side or to the Arabian world, in terms of the wood for sculpturing the doors. We know Arabs with the good architecture skills, right? So from Vanga, there used to be a lot of degradation taking place. So there is a time that El Nino did strike the area. Like the entire area was flooded. People were displaced. And do you know what's the cause of that? It's because the mangroves act as a barrier to the waves, the strong waves that come from the ocean. So with the absence of the mangroves, that is when the mangroves were cut, when the El Nino came by, you see there was no barrier to control the strong waves. So the entire ocean poured down to the village, impacting the livelihoods of the people negatively in terms of their farmlands, in terms of their houses. So that already was like an up call for people to take action. People now became aware of what the mangroves were. So it is through that particular incident that people knew now, or scientists came and put value to the mangroves in terms of the barrier factor. You get me now? So in terms of bogs on this other side, maybe you can just go back as to what I started earlier. Go back on maybe take the data that was there before. How was the area? Has any impact maybe been, has there any impact that the area did face or something sort of that? So from that scenario, you can pick something from it. I believe they were not 200 years ago, they were not the same as they are right now, I believe. So let's just learn from what things are. Let's learn from the experienced people or experienced stories that we hear concerning our own environment, so as we conserve it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, just like how mangroves got to be famous, maybe the salt marshes are not as famous as mangroves are at the moment, but I guess it's a matter of increasing the discussions on salt marshes or starting the discussions on salt marshes on the bog. Is it the bogs? Okay, that one. Initiating the discussions, doing more of the discussions. I mean, getting more people on board, getting people more aware of this, I mean, particular ecosystem and its abilities. It can be in terms of environmental regulation or whatever other capabilities it owns. So take the photos, start the talks. You do have a lot of technology here. So in terms of making the pictures look nicer, yeah, it can get people more engaged and wanting to like learn more about what this particular ecosystem can do for them and others in general, I guess. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. I think that's a nice positive note to end on.
It's energetic. Thank you so much for coming and engaging with our young people and telling your story, and for coming to Scotland and influencing hopefully the COP, and that they'll listen to the success that you've had and that we can get people excited about peat bogs. How great would that be? Thank you so much, guys.